I've always been taught that your value is not tied to what you have. Your value is within you. It's who you are as a human being.
Repeat that again so some Bahamians could hear that. Tell them that
your value is not tied to what you have or who or what you have access to. That's because that can change in a minute. And I think I've grown up with that.
Isn't that
I've grown up on that
Absolutely.
understanding that, people that throw themselves off of bridges when their finances, their finances fail, it's because they believe that their value as a human is tied to what they have.
Absolutely.
And there is nothing further from the truth.
Yeah.
There is nothing further from the truth. So for me, honestly, at my core, it's not changed me at all. It's allowed me to do some really cool things for myself and for other people.
Hi, everybody. We want to welcome you to another episode of the Legacy Podcast. And this is episode 9 of season 2. Loretta, can you believe it?
I'm enjoying it. I'm having such a great time. I really cannot believe that we're doing so much in such a short period of time, but it's been totally exciting. And, every time we come here, the most amazing thing are our guests. I mean, I love the environment here, so let me not forget.
Absolutely.
We've got to say that we're so grateful to the Echo Art Gallery here at Bahar Mar, that is our co-sponsor, along with the Butler Legacy Foundation. But it's always exciting to come, Franklin, because the reality is when people tell us how much they learn and how much they enjoy these podcasts, it encourages us to go out and find new, more exciting persons to interview. So I'm enjoying this immensely because I learn a lot.
I learn a lot myself, Loretta. I must tell you, it amazes me how many people connect with this podcast. I mean, I'm walking in the supermarket the other day and said, listen, when's the next episode of the podcast? And so we want to continue to invite all of our audience. If you're listening, please, click subscribe to YouTube, like, share. We think this is an incredible work that we're doing. As you all know, our focus has been around empowering and educating others, families, to think about legacy. And Loretta and I are blessed with this incredible legacy as being butlers and descendants of Sir Milo and Lady Caroline. And Loretta, if we think about this idea of legacy, there's no better way to protect legacy than through education.
Absolutely, and also to feature other families that have legacies, other Bahamian families. And I know eventually we're also going to go beyond the borders of the Bahamas, but for now, other Bahamian families that have done so much, that have contributed invaluably to, the economic growth of the Bahamas, the educational growth of the Bahamas. And today I know this is going to take us in 2 directions. So I'm really excited that we have a beautiful, beautiful guest today.
Absolutely. I must say so myself.
Not just physically, but a beautiful brain as
Spirit.
well, and spirit. And I'm going to let you introduce her. I'm a huge fan of hers, but, just being able to bring persons like her into this space, to be able to expose her even more to the world and the work that she does and the legacy that she is building upon in her family.
And without further ado, we really want to welcome Ms. Lisa McCartney, who is a pioneer in education. Really, a foundation in business, has so much in common with butlers in terms of how she was brought up, but we'll talk a little bit as we get into the show. But really, I think her most notable work has really been the work she's done in education, in transforming the minds of young Bahamians. And that, for me, is just an exciting. So welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank you for that very warm welcome.
Yeah. You deserve it. Let me tell you, before we even get into that, I have got to tell you that my earliest recollections of Lisa was when she ran what was called Unicorn Village, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was at like the foot of Hawkins Hill or somewhere in that area, in the Palmdale area. And the kids, what she did with little minds and little people was just so fascinating. Those are my earliest recollections. But Lisa, I realized that there was something even before that, before you did Unicorn Village. Obviously, that is your family's legacy, your business background, your educational and tertiary background in business. I would like for you to share with us a little bit about what you did before you actually got into being an educator.
So I grew up in the heart of Baintown on the corner of Blue Hill Road and Fleming Street at a little drugstore called Stardust. My dad started Stardust many, many years ago, and it's amazing. I've been watching your podcast, and it's amazing the similarities between other entrepreneurs. I, like many of the people that you spoke with, started working when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Now, when I say started working, and I don't know if there are any labor laws. There were any labor laws back at that time, but
they didn't implement them. It was called child labor.
I know, right? I don't remember when I actually started because it was always a part of my life. But I do remember that at 8 years old, we would open our then food store before Stardust. It was called CNS Foodland. I was on the corner of Lead Street, I think, or Peter Street, and Blue Hill Road. But at 8 years old was when my dad decided that I was comfortable enough on the cash register, and he would be in the back cutting meats, and we had a butchery, and he'd be in the back cutting his meat, and I'd be in the front, and I'd be cashing without anybody watching, and it was interesting. But I do remember that was when he gave me the responsibility of, okay, you can do this on your own. You're comfortable enough to give change and things along those lines. So I was 8 years old when I started working. And from that point forward, right up until, well, all my life, there was an expectation that on the weekends there were a few hours that we had to come in and we had to work, and that was true for the entire duration of our primary and high school lives.
So there were siblings.
Yes, I have one sibling, my younger sister Nikki.
So let me share with you, Franklin, two things I've gathered from this. First of all, she's from Baintown, man, the heart of where the Butlers really built their food and their empire.
And
that's the first thing.
And Somalia was a member of parliament.
That's right. But secondly, she was abused like us. She was they had us working from the time we could count.
That's for sure.
And so she's the similarities are amazing. And her dad probably was the butcher, the inventory manager, the everything manager, and she says that she was on the cash register. She probably had to stock shelves too, believe you me.
That's where I started. That was my entry level. It was stocking shelves and sweeping and mopping and doing whatever needed to be done.
Absolutely,
yes.
Anne of all trades.
So after all this abuse, all I could say to you is, I think all of us around here are relatively successful except for me. So that abuse...
Oh, that's right. We're only relatively successful. You're like extremely successful.
I'm saying that you guys are extremely successful.
Yeah, I understand.
And in relative terms, you guys have done exceptionally well. And I'm just saying that abuse, there must be a secret sauce around the Baintown. And I want to talk a little bit around, Lisa, from your perspective. Give some more context to really what the days of Baintown would have been like and how this eventually transformed your whole education journey.
So one of the things that I've often said to my dad is I learned more about customer service. I learned more about relationships. I learned more about entrepreneurship and business than I did in any one of my university classes, hands down, because I lived this. Yeah. We lived this. And the community, the beautiful thing about growing up in the Bahamas is the community is such and in an area like Baintown, one of the things that I learned very early on was respect and mutual respect. So it doesn't matter who it was. And we had very prestigious people that would come in to the store, but we had people that lived in the area. And the thing that I loved most, one of the things that I loved most and one of the lessons that I learned was the ability to relate to everybody regardless of stature. And that was something that I think is so incredibly important. That's a great life skill. And so I loved being in the community. Even now I see kids that I grew up with, that we used to play jacks. We used to move all the rice the rice containers on rice bags on a side and sit in the shelves, and we used to play Jack Stones and things along those lines.
That's right.
So I still see many of those people to this day, and I know many of those kids that I grew up with, in essence.
One of the interesting things about Baintown is the fact that it really gave birth to a lot of our outstanding Bahamians themselves. When you think of the demographics of the persons that lived in that area, it was probably the largest black community near to town, just over the hill. Just over the hill. Everything historical that relates to Nassau and New Providence, a lot of it happened in Baintown. Yeah. So while we were also, in Baintown, and we were also in the pond, what we had is exactly the experiences that Lisa would have had, in that, yes, we dealt with everybody.
Yep.
It did not matter what your station was in life. You came to the store. You came to the store. You came to your store, which was later Stardust. You came to Milo B. Butler and Sons. It's the interaction with people. We didn't have the huge international franchises then, and so everything was totally indigenous, and everyone that supported us were, from the area and even from other islands.
Real community, a real sense of community.
Very much so.
You think about that. So Lisa, let me just, as I think about the story of Stardust and how you grew up, one thing that stands out for me is my wife grew up on Young Street. And one of the things fascinating, you talk about your dad doing all these things, she always tells the story about how your dad would say, when she walked out the store, "Hey, my boss said I have to give you a little sweet treat. Thank you for your business." Talk about how that humility, right? Because here's the guy who owned the store. I mean, this is the man. But he continued to live this life of humility. Talk a little bit about your background, particularly your mom and dad, and how they formed an impression on you.
So one of the things that was always very important to us, that was instilled in us since we were young children, was this idea of how we affect other people. Yep. And this idea of cultivating healthy relationships. And so for my dad, for example, in the store, again, regardless of station, you'd have sometimes people come in, and granted, the majority of people that came into the store were living through, dire financial states and the like. But you found that when they came in, he always played on his music system. There was always classical music. There was always just beautiful music playing in the store. He always wore a suit to work.
Absolutely.
In the heart of Baintown, he wore a suit to work because his customers, he was honoring his customers by creating an environment. There was a gentleman called Bill Strickland that created a system called Manchester Bidwell in Philadelphia, maybe. And he has a TED Talk, and he opened his TED Talk by saying, or said at some point in the talk, he said, the only thing wrong with poor people is people keep treating them and reminding them that they're poor.
Yep.
And the idea was that you treat people with dignity. You treat all people, every person, every human being is deserving of being treated with dignity.
Absolutely.
And then that changes the narrative. So you have people that come into the store and they may be in a bad mood. They may feel as though they have no hope. And they're in this beautiful environment. Somebody's treating them, looking them in the eye, giving them free candy,
yes.
treating them with respect. That changes a person. And to this day, I'm 57 years old. And I'm going to say at least once a month, I run into somebody who tells me an amazing story about how my dad changed their life. And he didn't even know he was doing this. There's a beautiful story that he told of a little girl that a little girl told me that she was in the store. She said she and her friends wanted to steal some chocolate. They were like, "Ooh, there's some chocolate over there. Why don't we take that chocolate?" And she said, they huddled around. Each of them took a chocolate. She took a chocolate. And she said, as she was walking out, she turned around. She was like, "I really don't think this is a great idea." So she put it back. All the girls left. She left. She said the next time she came into Stardust, Daddy pulled her on the side and he said, "Listen, I saw you and your friends and I saw that what they did, and I realized that you put the chocolate back." He said, that's your level of integrity. He said, you hold on to that. He said, and that will carry you far. And he gave her a chocolate bar.
Wow.
And she started crying. She sells insurance, and she came into Windsor School to talk about an insurance policy for my staff. And she started crying, and she said, that changed my life in that moment. So
Profound,
we've always
isn't
been
that?
taught, both my parents, my mom and my dad, have taught us that people are people.
Yep.
And you treat people with respect. You don't treat people how they treat you. You treat them with respect, and then eventually you will get it back. You may not.
Yep.
But that's okay. Your responsibility is how you respond to others.
Absolutely.
But it's also about energy, isn't it? The energy you exude actually moves onto other people. Those positive attributes that your dad would have shared with other people, they realize how it made them feel. So one gesture can create a ripple effect, if you will.
Yes, you're right.
To create better people, really.
Yep.
And so that story in and of itself and the teaching to you is what makes you so totally amazing.
Yep.
And so I think having actually lived that life with your parents and learning those lessons that really only a parent, because he didn't just say it to you, he demonstrated it to you.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. Your mom and dad demonstrated these qualities. How was it that after they sent you off to university, you did business, and of course you were coming back to continue the family business, how was it to be able to talk with them and say, maybe there's another dream you wanted to pursue?
So the plan was that I would go off, I would study business, which I did. I studied business management, and I came back with a view of helping my parents to move their companies forward. So Dad had at the time there was Stardust on Blue Hill Road, and there was one also on East Street. There was a smaller store on East Street. My mom had the Savvy Boutique, and she had started dabbling in real estate, and so we had this master plan that we were going to do these amazing things. And I don't think I lasted for a year. I came back from uni in 1989. I dabbled in the pageant world. I did the Miss Bahamas pageant, so I wound up taking a year off to travel and represent the Bahamas and do all the fun things that I wanted to do.
Wait, hold on a minute. Stick a pin there.
Yeah.
She wants to just go over that. Did I miss? You were Miss Bahamas?
Maybe.
You were. So you see why she's so beautiful? Not only that, not only does she have brains, she represented our country with beauty and dignity. Miss Bahamas.
Yeah.
What year was that?
It was in 1989.
Wow.
Man, we have celebrities.
A
among
long
us.
time.
Honestly, I'm sorry, but
That's
no,
okay.
we have to get that in there. So after you were done being a world-class ambassador for the Bahamas,
I went back to Stardust and started my work properly, and that would have been in the summer of 1990. So the pageant ended I think it was in August of 1990. I think by January, Daddy realized that my focus was on kids. So kids would come to the store, and I would be so excited after school. I had an office, and I'd be doing the accounting and the bookkeeping and all that fun stuff. And at 3 o'clock, I'd always come out to the front, and that's when kids were walking home from school. And I'd always find interest in, what'd you do in school today? And what do you have for homework? Before long, that turned into bring your homework books, let me see you do it. And then I set up a little table in the back, and we used to do homework in the store. And I found that it was something that I was incredibly motivated by, and it was something that I was very passionate about. And so it's another reason why I then resented school, because I feel that if I were properly advised, I would have been advised to do two things in university. I should have studied music, and I should have studied education.
Interesting.
But at that time, it was doctor, lawyer, accountant, or business, pick one.
Yeah.
Like those were the careers that were made glamorous to us, I think is the right word. And I felt like those were the only choices I had. I hated studying, so there was no way I was doing doctor, lawyer, or accountant. And business seemed like the easy out.
Right.
And because my parents were business owners, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the opportunity to explore what I was really deeply passionate about.
So let's go back a little bit. Which schools did you attend before you went to university?
So I went to QC from I was 3 years old when I started until I was 17.
So, you know, QC is a very good institution.
QC is an excellent
school. And I'm
school.
not knocking it. But, you know, one of the things that I've gathered that you have been able to do as an educator, especially in such a dynamic world, your methodology in the schools, and of course we'll talk about this more, but your methodology in the way that you teach, or you educate rather, your kids is different. And maybe if there was more of that then, you would have had the opportunity to explore a more diverse option for where you would have gone.
And you know what? My mother said, nothing is absolute, because if I didn't have that experience of relative normalcy in school, I would not have been motivated to do what I do.
Yeah.
So my mom says nothing is absolute.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
The fact that I had, you know, and I was just that kid that was always naughty. I was that kid that was always in trouble. I think I was suspended in 4th grade because I came to school late yet again. And I remembered the teachers like, Lisa Sawyer, you're going to miss break again because you're late again and you're always late. And I remember just saying, you know what? I don't drive. You need to have this conversation with my mother. And of course, that was not appropriate.
Right.
So I took a smacking that day.
I like that. I like the fact that you had actually had the full experience of the family business, that you'd actually been able to go off, because in everything there is a business aspect, no matter what your career choice is. There's always the business aspect. You've got to get down to the dollars and cents. You've got to be able to make it profitable. So, I mean, it was not in vain. But like your mom said, nothing is absolute.
Nothing is absolute. And so there was value in my education. I say that to say. And, you know, as terrible a student as I was, a lot of it for me, it was just social. Like I was just, again, I think you guys use the word, I was a bit of a disruptor. And I needed to be involved. I need to be involved in whatever I'm doing. For me, authenticity it's a core value of mine. So I can't do anything halfway. I will not do it if I'm not going to be able to give 100%.
Fully committed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. I love that. That's a great ingredient for success.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, so you have this passion for education, you're helping these kids at Stardust, and then, like, listen, you got 2 fully blown schools now. Talk us through that transition.
So I said to my dad, Dad, I need to talk to you. And it's funny, he says he remembers us kind of walking back to the office, and he knew, because he could see it. He said he could see that I was so focused on creating little programs for the kids in the area, and it's just, when I was Miss Bahamas, one of the things I did was something called the Miss Bahamas Shopping Spree, because it dawned on me I wanted to do something that was substantial and something that meant something. And I realized that a lot of these kids in the area didn't have some certain opportunities that we took for granted. So one of the things I always loved doing was shopping. I've loved shopping since I was a very little girl. And it suddenly dawned on me, I was like, you know, these kids, we take that for granted. We go to the mall and we pick up some shoes, and that's probably not their reality. So what I did is I hit up a number of business houses, and we were able to raise, I forget how much money it was, but we were able to give each child $200. And what we did is we didn't give them money.
Cash.
We gave them, I worked with Mr. Solomon at then Mall at Marathon. So we made mall bucks. And so we gave each child 200 mall bucks. They had to meet us at Stardust, ironically. And we gave these invitations out, which I gave out at work and all that good stuff. So they met us at the store, and we popped them in a jitney, and we took them to the mall at Marathon, and we took them in pockets. I had volunteers, and they got to go shopping, and they could buy anything that they want.
Wow.
These kids were so happy. It was so lovely to see them walking out with their big shopping bags. One of the things that I noticed, and I thought it was just so amazing, was how many of the children wanted to get something for their mummy or for their Grammy. And I thought that was just amazing. And that showed the spirit in the community.
Yep.
You know, that these kids, while they didn't have a lot, they still had a spirit of giving.
Yes.
So to me, that was really, really encouraging.
But once again, here you are, you've become like your dad. And your mom, I imagine, you were a giver. And once you sort of introduced that to these children, they realized that they had the ability, the choice to be able to give as well, because you gave them this ability. And hopefully that is a lesson that they will continue to carry with them. That, I must commend you. That's lovely. That's absolutely lovely and so touching.
So I told my daddy, Daddy, I'm out.
Wow.
No, I said to him, I'd really love to explore working with children. I feel as though there was a real need. I wanted the opportunity to create an environment where children could feel ownership and where they could have many different experiences in life that could help to shape them and help to develop them and help to encourage their creativity. So I opened the Culture Club.
Oh, it was the Culture Club.
So that was in
Please
Palmdale.
define Culture Club.
Why- no,
because
but
I
wait
think
So it wasn't the club.
I just want to make sure people understand
It wasn't the
culture.
club.
Why was I thinking unicorn?
Unicorn, because that was later. Unicorn
you
is
did
what.
unicorn too?
Yeah, unicorn.
Okay,
is
because
later.
I was about to say, okay.
So the Culture Club was an after-school program that I opened. It was in that little building just across the street from the entrance to Multi-Discount Furniture in Palmdale.
Okay, I knew it was somewhere in
And
Palmdale.
it was an after-school club. So I opened at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So there were some preschools that closed at noon or at 1. And I stayed open until 6. The bulk of my patrons came from St. Thomas More School. So what I would do is I would walk over to St. Thomas More School. I wrote the heads of school, and I said, listen, I'm going to create this after school center if your parents are stuck at work, or if they need somewhere for the kids to be. And the idea was, at the center, the kids would come after school. They'd do their homework first. So we'd get homework done out of the way. I hired teachers, and they'd study with them. If they needed a little bit of tutoring, they would do that. But we offered things like music class.
Wow.
We offered things like dance class. We offered foreign languages and things along those lines. And we traveled. I took the kids to Orlando. I took the kids we did all sorts of interesting travel. Once a month, we would have a dining experience. And that is, we would bring the kids to either a Crystal Palace was the hotel here at that time. And the boys had to wear a button-up shirt, and the girls had to wear a dress, and the boys had to pull the chairs out for the girls. And we'd use our correct knife and fork, and we taught them, we helped them to understand how to relate to other people. And what this does is, this is something that my mom paid great money for when I finished university. I did something called John Robert Powers Finishing School in New York because I wanted to do the whole modeling thing, and I wanted to be a showgirl. So I thought I felt so much more confident, and that confidence felt really good.
Yeah.
And I thought I would love to share this with children in our community, because it translates to how you relate to people, how people relate to you. I always remember, when I went to Albany to see what they were doing, basically.
Right.
They had invited me to help them find somebody to run their kids program. And I went home thinking, I want to do that. And so I went home and I put together a plan. I went back, I said, listen, you won't find anybody like me. Here's what I can do for you. Let me run this program for you.
Wow.
And with that, Christopher and Ann shook my hand and said, welcome aboard.
Let me tell you, what you've done is not just culture. You introduced to many youngsters things their parents may not have even had the ability to know that they weren't doing.
Absolutely.
You taught them courtesy. You taught them etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
You taught them how to dress.
Mm-hmm.
You taught them how to appreciate music.
Which-
But most importantly, you taught them that the education come first.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it was homework first, and then all of the other good stuff afterwards.
I took a group to Fort Lauderdale to see, I think it was The Lion King. And for many of the parents that went along, and I always include parents in anything I do. If you want to come along on a field trip, come along on the field trip. It's fine.
Yeah.
And I remember this lady. She was a bank manager, and her daughter was one of my students. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "I didn't even know this existed." And this was the mom.
Yeah.
The kid was excited beyond, but she said, "I didn't even understand the concept of a Broadway play." She said, "This was fantastic."
Wow.
And
Exposure.
again,
Exposure.
Absolutely. I love this idea of
Experiences and
experiences
exposure.
and inspiration.
Because truly, at the end of the day, I mean, people's experiences also help to
Shape who they are.
Shape who they are.
Absolutely.
You know, those assimilated experiences help to create who we are as human beings. But more importantly, you were able to do it, Miss Lisa McCartney, in such a way that it was enjoyable. You were actually teaching kids, but it seems that you were also teaching parents.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you were instilling a lot there. This is a legacy.
The idea
This is
was
a legacy. I want you to continue because
Thank you.
my earliest recollection was Unicorn. Now you've jogged my memory. There was
Mm-hmm.
Culture Club. Please take us through the exercise of how you have become this iconic woman,
iconic.
Bahamian woman who was sought after by the owners of Albany, no less, and such. I mean, let's face it, prestigious communities that wanted this little girl from Baintown to come and do her magic in their community.
Absolutely.
Well, so moving on from the Culture Club, I ran that for about 5 years, and then just absolutely outgrew the space. The space it was crazy. Tried to buy some land in Palmdale because in my head, I had to be in Palmdale because that was where critical mass was, and that was where people were. And I remember trying to buy some land behind the old Wendy's, and was told no, they didn't want a school back there, and the neighbors didn't want a school, and it was very sad. And so I was looking for land. My aunt said, "I have a piece of land off of JFK Drive. If you want to look at that, why don't you look at that?" I went up there, and I don't know if you remember the old Imperial Mattress
Yeah,
Company.
absolutely.
The factory
That's
was
right.
there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But beyond the factory, there was nothing. So we had to take our gardener and cut the road up to where the Meridian School is now. And I got to the top of the hill, and I started crying. And I'm like, "This is terrible. Nobody's going to come out here. It's in the middle of the bush. I can't do this." And I remember my dad saying, "Elise, what you do is so important, and you're so passionate. If you build it, they will come."
Wow.
He really said that.
Wow.
And so I thought it through, and at this time, I think by this time I was married and starting to think about having a family of my own, and started kind of visiting schools because I wanted to kind of create a plan for my children.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really bothered me was the amount of schools that had great academic programs, but that said, parents can come to this line, but you can't cross this
that,
line.
okay.
And you certainly can't come between the hours of 10 and 2 when we're in school. You can come up, drop your kid off
and leave
up
them.
to 9 or 10, and you can come back at 2:30 to pick them up. And I thought, that's not right. I want to be involved with my kids. There's no more important job I'll ever have in the world than being their mom.
Yeah.
And I want to be involved. I want to come read stories and all this good stuff. And I just feel that the climate at that time was not very inclusive for parents. So I built a school. While I was pregnant, I bought the land, and during my daughter's first year of life, I was on a construction site, And I opened then Unicorn Village, the Meridian School, on her first birthday.
Wow.
She turned 28 last week.
Wow.
So the Meridian School is 27 years old.
That is wonderful.
And
Congratulations.
the idea was to roll in what I'd been doing at the Culture Club, but then to add a preschool program with a view of having it grow with my daughter.
I got
And
you.
I wanted to be involved in every aspect of her education.
But how did you transition? I'm sorry for cutting you off there, because I love that. Did you have to go back to do teaching
No.
credentials and all of that?
No. So what I did is I just made sure that I hired well-qualified, trained people who were not only well-qualified and trained, but who also shared my ethos. When I interview a teacher, and I shouldn't say this, but when I interview a teacher, I usually ask them, what relationship do they have with their students, their peers, but with the parents? And for me, if I hear a teacher say, oh yeah, parents, I keep them, I let them know who's the boss on the first day. I say, thank you very much for coming. It's been lovely meeting you.
Good
And
to
we
see you in the
move
place
on.
view.
So for me, hiring staff that shared my ethos, and my ethos is I'm very relational. Every single member of my 600 people that go to schools that I have anything to do with have my cell phone, or if they don't have my cell phone and they call the office and say, I need to talk to Miss Lisa, my cell phone is given to them. And that's because this is you've heard it before, the student, the teachers, and the home. Like,
That's right.
We have to work together.
It's a tripartite relationship.
I can't teach your child effectively if you're going through a divorce at home and there's stress at home. I cannot relate to your child properly if I don't know
Understand.
that.
Yep.
If somebody is suffering cancer in the family,
Yep.
or there's mental illness, I cannot relate to your child if it's just come to school, let's work, go home. Not authentically.
Yep.
And so for me, that's always been very, very, very important, that I have people that are qualified and that share the ethos of what I'm trying to do as a business.
So you teach to the whole soul.
Yes. I teach nothing but music and choir. I'm the choir director.
No, but
So I don't
the
teach a
point
child
is
math
your school embraces
Yes.
the whole soul
Absolutely.
of the being,
Absolutely.
of the child, of the environment, of the family. They become your family for the 12 years they're with
Absolutely.
you.
100%. And that
And your schools have grown with your the size, the curriculum has grown with your own children.
yes.
Okay. So it's now if I were to come to a school that Miss Lisa McCartney is affiliated with, I can start from
18
preschool
months,
straight through to
18 years. 18 months to 18 years.
18 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Congratulations. And you've done all of that in 27 years.
Pretty much, yes. 27 plus the 5 at Culture Club.
That is
Amazing.
totally
Amazing.
amazing.
So, Lisa, talk to us about the challenges. I mean, here you are, female entrepreneur in education. You know, obviously, we know the impact of your father on you and the entrepreneur background that you've come with. But, you know, for these entrepreneurs who continue to listen to this show, talk us through those challenges. I mean, you almost make it seem easy. You know, this is a process of managing your children, and you have this passion for kids, you hire the right people. Surely it's a little bit more complex than that.
Yes, but one of the things that I'm also very, very good at is not giving value to anything negative.
Yeah.
So honestly, have there been challenges? Sure. I'm sure there have been tons of challenges. There's one challenge that I remember that if you ask me what my biggest challenge is, and I'll tell you, it was securing financing to build the Windsor school.
Wow.
To build the Windsor brand, because, it was big, right? And getting financing and securing financing was very, very challenging. And I remember that only because I think that is the only time in my life, in my career, that I can remember feeling like, oh my gosh, this mightn't actually happen. This might not happen, because I was dependent on the banks, and they were not convinced that I knew what I was doing.
They're not cooperative even with women,
Yeah.
Franklin. Let's be
So
real.
they were not convinced, yes.
We live in a beautiful country, and opportunity. Whether when you talk about entrepreneurship, and this is a huge part of what this podcast is about. But I'm gonna let Lisa expound on this. But one of the biggest challenges that women have in the Bahamas is being able to approach a financial institution and secure financing.
Yes, that's been my biggest challenge in business throughout the 30 some years that I've been doing business. That was it, trying to secure financing for the Windsor brand.
And what unlocked that for you? Talk people through kind of what were the lessons from that, and what advice would you give someone who is faced with that challenge?
Again, the road isn't always easy, and you do have stumbling blocks, but you can choose, when you come to an impasse, you can choose to either stay there or you can find a way around it.
Right.
And for me, not opening that school wasn't an option.
Wow.
It just was not an option. So I knocked on doors. I exhausted every family extra nickel I could find and squeeze. And I didn't give up. So I think that's the lesson, is not to give up. Like I did not give up. And there were some days where I thought, you know what, maybe it's just not meant to be. And I'm like, nah, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But persistence, I mean, once again, you look at it, she obviously had the drive to be persistent. But what really concerns me most is that here is a woman that has demonstrated her stickability to what she's doing. She's demonstrated that she can grow something from nothing, and her past experiences still was not enough. She is enough.
Yep.
But yet,
people did not see the
that
value.
Yeah.
Especially these banks.
And that can be discouraging. That can be very discouraging. But again, this is where confidence comes in, and just understanding your value and not allowing the world to write your narrative for you.
And how, when you look at a Windsor school today, in terms of, I mean, when I was growing up, which predates both of you, what we considered in the day, there were two schools in particular, St. Andrews and Queen's College, that really did not allow people of color. That was the first thing.
Yep.
And then secondly, St. Andrews, which was perceived or believed or whatever, perception is important, was a very expensive school in the day. And, everyone's like, oh, you have to be really wealthy, or you have to be of this strata to go to St. Andrews. And now you have the Windsors and others that cater primarily to a high-end demographic. How does that affect the educational process in the Bahamas for other Bahamians? And tell me a little bit more about accessibility for kids from the Bain and Grantstown area into a Windsor school now.
Well, that's something that I've always been very, very passionate about. And since the time of the Culture Club, every school that I've ever been involved with, every initiative that I've ever been involved with, as a rule, and I think it goes back to my spiritual background, but as a rule, 10% of my students are fully scholarshiped and fully funded. Now,
I applaud you.
You will
this
never
I love.
see, and one of the things, again, back to authenticity, you will never see me in the newspapers shaking hands with a lovely little recipient of a scholarship, because I believe that it's personal.
Yeah.
I believe that it's, again, I don't want these kids to feel as though they're being given a handout. They're being given an
It
opportunity.
also gives a stigma to the kids
Yes.
as well.
They're
and you
simply-
don't want them to be stigmatized.
Right. They are simply being given an opportunity which is given to the next child, but their parents happen to be giving them that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I think for me, and you know what? In fairness, there are 3 big private schools on the western side of the island. All 3 of them are following suit. Now, I don't know if they're up to 10% in scholarship children, but I do know that both of the other schools in the western area have offered scholarships to Bahamian students, to deserving Bahamian students. And that changes the game for them.
I had to ask that question because being a St. Andrews alumni myself, I think that one of the things that I learned being at St. Andrews was that, you know, the scholarships they offered to deserving kids from the public school system demonstrated 2 things. It demonstrated their commitment to the wider community to make sure that we can close the disparity. And secondly, what I saw is that every one of those students that were given scholarships, even though, you know, we knew they came, so it's a little different, they were either the head boys, the head
Yes.
girls.
Yes.
They were some of the
Yes.
most outstanding
Students.
Yes.
academic achievers
Yes.
in St. Andrews.
So what I wanted to do was to make sure that there was no disparity between a student that was paying and a student that wasn't paying. So one of the things that we do with our scholarship, our students that are scholarshiped, not only do they receive uniforms, but they also receive lunches every day.
Okay.
So nobody's uniform is tattered. Nobody's bringing a little bag of, you know, a sausage sandwich from home when I'm eating my truffle pasta next to you. So what we tried to do was to bridge that gap and to make sure that these children don't feel different in any way,
In
shape,
any
or form.
which
In
way.
any way. And one of the things I always say is I call it my social experiment, because children, we can learn so much from children. And one of the beautiful, somebody asked me, I was at a dinner party a few years ago, and somebody said, but, you know, what about making friends? Like, how do they really make friends with the children who are, you know, from these wealthy families and things along those lines? And I said, you know what? Kids
are so different.
They are so different. They're not consumed by the material
And the
that we are
statuses.
at their core. Yeah, they like their fancy tennis and their Game Boys and all that. But at their core, they understand relationships.
I think it's a
one of
learned
the
behavior,
coolest-
though. When
Yes,
you
yes.
see the discrimination or you see that, it's really a learned behavior. And kids are, as you said, at their core, they're innocent. They don't understand the difference because a poor child doesn't know they're poor.
Yes, and to demonstrate that, one of the coolest relationships during this whole process that I've seen is there is a child was at the school, and he's in uni now, but this was maybe 8 years ago. That family is arguably the wealthiest family that I've ever met in my life. It's just insane.
Yep.
And his best friend was a little boy who I gave a scholarship to because his mother was the housekeeper for one of my students, and she would pick him up from public school, and then she would come to school to pick up the children that she worked for, and he would ask, "Can I stay and play in the playground for a little while, Mommy? Can we just stay?" And I would say, "Oh my goodness, yeah, let him play." And he was such a sweet kid. And I said, you know, would he like to come to school just one day? And she said, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I can't afford this," and blah, blah. And I said, no, it's fine. You know, we have a budget. Every year, I just made sure when we were doing our intake for every year, I made sure that we had a certain percentage. And like I said, we started off with 10%. Sometimes that changed to more. And this boy started school, I think he might have been in second grade at the time. When they were in 9th grade, because the other chap left in 10th grade to go to boarding school, but when they were in 9th grade, these kids were thick as thieves. He and the son of
this other person,
Mr. Uber Wealthy, were best friends. Like,
Wow.
they did everything together. They were starting little businesses at school. They wanted to sell this and sell that. And it was very cool to see how status meant nothing.
Yeah.
It honestly meant nothing to them. These were two just very kind, sensible little boys.
So I've got to go take this even a little further. And I know, when we're exposed, it's not just a matter of having someone from a lesser background being exposed to things that other people have. Is it reciprocated?
100%.
Do we sometimes take these extremely privileged children into the environment where less privileged children live, where less privileged children are?
So
I want to know how holistic is this?
We've done pre-COVID. We've always supported the Great Commissions Ministries,
Yep.
and pre-COVID, we had a 5th grade class that the teacher was very, very community and civic minded, and not only would we raise money and send, buy food supplies for them, but on a number of occasions, she actually took the kids to serve the lunches. They have a long line they have a great food program, and she would take the kids to serve the lunches. And these things were like, my kids automatically think about how can we help. Pre-COVID, again, my daughter and a few of the high schoolers went into the Stardust building, painted it all up, and made it into the Find You Foundation. And kids, basically, they created an activity center for children in Baintown where they could come after school and basically do what I did at Culture Club.
Amazing.
Do their homework for an hour. We gave them a snack every day. Some of those kids, that snack was
their only
pretty
meal,
much the only
perhaps.
food they had each
Yeah.
day.
That's right.
Then they would do music. Like my daughter always went to, NYU and Manhattan School of Music for her summer camps. So her best friend would go to Parsons for art camps in the summer. So what these girls did, they put together after school programming for these children. And let me tell you, those kids used to run, not walk, run to Find You, to the old Stardust building after school. And it ended with COVID. There were so many tears when that program was ending, when we knew it was the last day, because it just wasn't sustainable any longer with what was happening. And those kids were absolutely moved. I had another, again, uber wealthy family from Albany who he sent me a text, and he said, Lisa, he said, my daughter, who's, again, arguably very, very wealthy, he said, I've never seen this side of her. He said, she is now so consumed with what is happening in our world and how we can help people. He said, I'm honored to call you friend. And this is a parent wrote this to me.
Wow.
And it's because after she had worked with the kids at Find You, she was just a different child.
Yeah.
She was not so selfie driven. He's like, oh my God, she's not taking a selfie anymore. And she's just really concerned about other people, which is
That is
fantastic.
such a valuable lesson, because sometimes people assume that privilege does not want to be involved, that privilege does not want to know the other side. And I think that when I say that you teach the entire soul, obviously I must tell you, I'm so happy to know that it's reciprocated on all sides.
All sides, yes, absolutely.
And that's important. But having gone through all of this, you must have indeed had challenges along the way. Obviously, we've learned of the difficulty you had in securing financing and all of that. Speak to us a little bit to someone out there who, finds themselves right now in a hard place trying to just get over that hurdle so they can become a success. Tell us about one of the hardest things you've had to overcome.
Again, in business, I tend not to give value to things that I don't like. I just don't acknowledge, and that's just me. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Have there been tough times? Yeah, there have been times where, I'm trying to make a decision, a financial decision. Do I do this? Do I do that? And it's, again, it has to do with emotional intelligence as well. Like you have to look at things realistically. You have to follow your passion. It's all of the cliches that we ever hear, but it's truly and authentically kind of buying in and believing
So you overcome all
So
those
you
difficulties.
overcome your difficulties. You win some, you lose some. You know, people join your school, people leave your school.
Okay,
It
so
is
then
what it is.
let me turn this around then. How has success changed Lisa McCartney?
I don't think it has. Like, I treat everybody that I come into contact with respectfully. The way it's changed me is I get to go on some really cool trips and I buy some really cool shoes. But in terms of who I am at my core, I've always been taught that your value is not tied to what you have. Your value is within you. It's who you are as a
I'm
human
going to
being.
repeat that again so some Bahamians could hear that. Tell them that
So your value is not tied to what you have or who or what you have access to. That's because that can change in a minute. And I think I've grown up with that.
Isn't that
I've grown up
powerful?
on that
Absolutely.
understanding that, you know, people that throw themselves off of bridges when their finances, you know, when their finances fail, it's because they believe that their value as a human is tied to what they have.
Absolutely.
And there is nothing further from the truth.
Yeah.
There is nothing further from the truth. So for me, honestly, at my core, it's not changed me at all. It's allowed me to do some really cool things for myself and for other people.
So tell me something. So what's the mission of Lisa, who's gone from being a student of business to an educator, 2 schools later? What's the mission?
At this point in my life, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that, like everything, we grow, we change. I don't know if my focus has changed, but right now I'm very, very much into mentorship and helping young people and older people, just helping anybody to understand their value and to understand how to find a full and fulfilling life. I started something with the schools where there are 5 tenets that are the basis for what I do as an educator, as a human being. And these I've been teaching. I ran it all summer long, and it's amazing. Parents were calling me going, hey, my kid's different. What's going on? Yeah. So basically what we do is we start with this, and for little kids, I've broken it down to celebrating me. So there's something called celebrating me, and basically that's stopping, acknowledging who you are, celebrating who you are. So often we're consumed with everybody else, everything else, and we just need to know, listen, I love people, but I also love sitting on my balcony by myself with my AirPods on, listening to some great music. I love that. So there are going to be times where I know you want to hang, I know you want to go out and have some wine. I don't want to do that. Yeah. Today is what I want to do. So I teach the kids to acknowledge how they feel, acknowledge who they are. Yeah. The second one is called I See You. And it's the same thing. It's understanding and respecting that you guys are different.
Absolutely.
I want to party today. Why don't you want to party with me? You know, you may want to just be sitting on the patio, relaxing. You may want to be going for a stroll on the beach, or you may want to get together. But I have to respect where you are and how you feel. The third tenet is called Together We Rock, and it's about teamwork. Nobody lives in isolation. Yeah. We need each other. We are relational human beings. So learning to cultivate relationships that are healthy and so that we can work together to a common goal is fine. The next one is called Sunny Side Up.
Wow.
And that is cultivating a positive disposition, a sunny disposition. If I'm feeling sad or something negative is going on, that's fine. I need to acknowledge that, but I don't always need to share that with you. So I don't need to walk into a room with a long face, or if you say hello to me, I don't speak to you because I don't feel like speaking to you. That's just wrong. So we teach the kids how to cultivate a sunny disposition, no matter what's going on. But again, not ignoring how you feel. And the last one is called Chameleons Are Amazing, and it's about pivoting to solve problems. We sometimes get stuck in a, oh my gosh, I'm doing this and it's not working. Okay, let's change the way we look at this, and maybe we can be successful if we look at it from a different perspective. Wow. So those are the 5 tenets that we use, and I call them my life hacks. And
So you did psychology?
I,
So let me
in
just
my
get,
head, I did music and psychology in my head.
Let me get right down. Let me get right down with you, because it sounds like you do a little psychology, not
Listen,
only on these kids.
I would
man.
love to do. That's my next thing that I may do. Is I would love to go and pursue.
Girl, you already
counseling,
got that down pat. They
because
can't teach you
I
nothing.
love that.
That's like you going off to business school. You already know what to do. So you don't need to do no psychology. You could write a book right now on your 5 tenets of how people can celebrate themselves. Miss Lisa McCartney, I decree you are a psychologist.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So Lisa, I got to ask this question, right? Because we started with the story of Starbucks and CNS,
yeah.
Foodland, or whatever it's called. That business is closed. In our own family, we've gone through this transition.
Now, why you got to talk about this part when we done move on and stuff?
It's all right.
Because what do you say to those families as entrepreneurs who are struggling with this burden of success that, these multi-generational businesses or the lack thereof? So there's this entrepreneur who is, daddy and mommy has started this business. Stardust is gone.
But never forgotten.
Do you mourn that? How do you celebrate these legacies that are put on us? And how do we make those pivots? Because that's really what many of our viewers look at this in terms of multi-generational businesses.
I do mourn it. I did mourn it for my dad because, as you know, those businesses, that area changed with the road when the road changed. It wasn't for lack of trying.
Yep.
And those businesses suffered with the road, the changes in the road, and so I did mourn, and I was.
Just for clarity of our public and for those who may not be aware, it went from being a two-way street
to a one-way.
to being a one-way street, which made it a little more difficult for
navigating. And the bulk of our business was when people were coming home from work in the afternoon. So when they were going home from work, now they're on Market Street, and it meant something. If you had asked me, would it matter? I would have said no ahead of time, but it did. It did matter. It affected everyone. And it is what it is. But I would have said, I felt bad for Dad and all that good stuff in hindsight. And when you look at it from a different perspective, my dad said, I took my dad to Italy for his 80th birthday 2 years ago.
Wow. And
we were sitting on the Amalfi Coast and just kind of loving life. And he would have never, ever done that. I don't know if another thing that people talk about my dad all the time is that 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. he was in Stardust Monday through Sunday. Yeah. So he said, Lise, I would have stood right up in there and I would have died right in that store, because he felt so committed to his customers, and he just wanted to be there, and that's all he knew, and he would have stayed there. So he says, you know what? That road closure, that road change was actually a blessing, because he now goes to his house in Eleuthera and he relaxes. And he would not have done that. Daddy would not have voluntarily stepped away from Stardust.
So there are two things I take away from this, Franklin. Even though you're ignoring me, there are two things I take away from this. One of the things is that, with your businesses, Lisa, especially when we're talking about building generational businesses, obviously that will never be forgotten. But I think that what we had struggled with in our business was also the sustainability and having the next generation who wanted to take it on. Yeah. Now, I know you come from a smaller family with just 2 siblings, so there might have been difficulty in that. But even with us having many children, offspring of Sir Milo, and many other generations, we've struggled as well with the sustainability.
And I think if I even look at Stardust, if Stardust were still here and Daddy did want to retire by some miracle, my sister's a chef. There is no way she would want to run a Stardust. I tried, and there is no way that I would want to do it. So, I think that's real. Yeah. That's a real thing that we need to consider, and you need to honor your children. I think some parents may guilt their kids into doing it, but then we lose authenticity. They're not happy, and I think the psychological effects of that are frightening as well.
But not only that, I also feel like, you've touched on a very good point, because if you're almost forced to carry something on, and you're not happy, you're not going to make it you're not going to continue with the great success that it would have had under someone who was as passionate as your dad. So in fact, you're actually doing a disservice. But the legacy of Starbucks, even though Stardust is no longer there, the legacy is what has been instilled in you as an individual. The legacy of Butler's Bargain Mart and Milo B. Butler and Sons Wholesale and is what is instilled in us that allows us the ability to pivot and to do other great successes.
And that's what I hear from Lisa when she says, I see you.
Yes.
In those lessons that she's teaching to children every day. But Lisa, just in terms of trying to wrap up this conversation, as hopefully our last question maybe, 30 years from now, how do you think about your legacy? How do you think about, I've lived my mission, I've honored my legacy, I've lived a life well purposed?
Well, I think in terms of legacy for me, it's twofold. It's my children, my biological children, and how they impact their societies. So my oldest daughter is currently a neurofeedback practitioner in Scotland, and she is poised to do amazing things. She's working with children with traumatic brain injuries, and she's just doing an amazing work. My second daughter is 9/10 of the way to being a lawyer, and she could not wait to come back home to contribute to our society, which I'm really pleased about. I also have a 15-year-old son who is just now starting to find his way and starting to mature and kind of deciding what kind of human he wants to be, which is great to see that transition. So first of all, I would want my children to be all contributing in very meaningful ways to their respective societies. Likewise, the children that have been exposed to and have to a Lisa school, again, I would like to see them all contributing to our society or to their societies. And I think the children that I've been able to give opportunities to, I'd like that to continue. And that's something that I'm actually working on right now. We started something called the $1 Million Scholar with the very generous support of Albany, where we went out and found kids, and not necessarily the brightest kids in the public school system, but I spoke to guidance counselors, so children who maybe weren't doing very well, but in a different environment could exceed and could excel. And we're finding that it's just been amazing to see these children get scholarships into universities. My first ever student that I gave a scholarship to got a full scholarship. He got a full ride at Juilliard.
Wow.
And so we're seeing more and more of these stories. So I would love to impact change in our country from an academic perspective. I think that there are several ways in which we can really just change our society and improve our society, and that is through, first of all, education, through the arts, through sports. And I think that I would love to be involved with kind of creating something on the performing arts level that could be inclusive with children, for children all over the country, to help them express themselves creatively. It means so much, and it can just absolutely change their outlook on life and create wonderful, wonderful outcomes.
You've done so much amazing creative work with children on your own. I truly wish that I know that one of the mantra of our current administration is the whole orange economy and performing arts and all sorts of different types of arts and creativity. I just wish that more of them I just wish the government could have the synergy that you have. Let me just say that right there. I wish the government, because I think that especially through music. You know that once children are introduced to music and they perform better academically, it's proven.
100%.
You know?
100%.
And when sometimes we're not all academic, maybe sometimes we excel in creating things. And so I want to commend, I mean, I know I've commended you already, but I wish that we could have more opportunities for our children.
I would love to see public-private partnerships where education is concerned. I think that would absolutely change the game for the Bahamas.
Okay, you and I gotta make sure we go do more PPPs, not just in development, infrastructure, but in education.
Absolutely.
All
In
right,
education,
so I
think
love
it
that.
could
We're gonna
absolutely
we're
change
gonna
the
get
game.
you and the Minister of Education and some other people together, because we need this partnership.
Yes.
And I'm not joking with this. We need this partnership to make our people more confident and to let them know that we're not all
Yes.
going to be Rhodes Scholars.
Yes.
That's a fact.
Yes.
Some of us are going
But-
to be Michelangelos.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know?
I would have never, ever been a Rhodes Scholar again, but here I am.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So I think just giving kids these amazing opportunities, and it's not difficult.
Yeah.
It really isn't difficult. It's about training. It's about creating. It's about creating a culture of excellence,
Yes.
and a culture of a global culture as well. I know we tend to we get really scared when we talk about global culture. We're like, no,
Absolutely.
that's Bahamian or nothing. It's wonderful, but it's not going to help me when I try to perform on a global stage.
Let me tell you something.
It's wonderful to be
we
all
all know
Bahamian.
that.
I'm 100%, but I need to know what's happening in the world.
Not
I
only
need
that,
to be exposed
and you
to.
need to be fully exposed, and
Yes.
you've done that, and that is, I think more and more people are appreciating
Yes.
that. But it's important that we also stay grounded in who we are,
are,
this authenticity
absolutely.
that you spoke about.
Absolutely.
But as we close out, I want to say, Lisa, this has been, for me, I always learn a lot from these podcasts, between Franklin teaching me something and between our guests teaching me something. But, you know, just before we close, you have done an extraordinary job in whatever space you've found yourself, in whatever space you've developed. How do you, as a successful entrepreneur, an educator, how do you now find time, because apparently every parent's got your phone contact, you've got 3 different schools you're running, how do you find time for you?
I do. I do. My work is mostly, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And, if I do get a call from a parent in the evening, it's something serious. So it's something that they feel can't wait until tomorrow. And I feel as though it's my responsibility to make sure that I acknowledge parents and help them through any challenges that they may be having. But I'm very good at, weekends. I travel. I spend time, like my daughter lives in Scotland, so I do travel to see her a few times a year. I have a very active social life. I enjoy a good night out. So I do find time for the things that I love, and that
So
has
you've
to
got
do with
good balance.
celebrating me. Yeah.
got good
I think I have
balance.
great. Yeah, I think I have great balance. I'm
Awesome.
very active in my church. I do the things that I love, and it's therapeutic, right?
I want to congratulate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank
This
you.
has been another educational, informative legacy podcast. And Loretta, I want you to know, I wasn't ignoring you.
You was ignoring me, but I want to tell you what I learned today.
Tell me what you learned today.
I learned that plenty great things has come out of Baying Down.
That's for sure. And you know my ma from there.
Well, not only that, we got plenty roots and business
That's for
come
sure.
from there.
That's
And
for
now
sure.
we now know that the wonderful, amazing former Miss Bahamas, outstanding educator, businesswoman, and entrepreneur, Miss Lisa Sawyer-McCartney, is a product of Baying Down.
That's a fact. And continue to have global impact.
Thank you.
Right from Baying Down. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
And we want to thank all of our guests who continue to tune into these wonderful episodes of the Legacy Podcast. We hope today that you guys were educated and informed, that you are reflecting around your own legacy. what life are you living? Whether that's in entrepreneurship, whether that's in education. Here's a great example of someone who started in business, a great legacy, and ended up in education. Still living her passion and purpose in business. And as I recall the story again of my wife and Lisa's father talking about, his boss telling him that, he should give her this candy, giving her a sense of purpose. And really we want to make sure that as we think about these podcasts, we continue to cause you to think about your own purpose and how you think about your legacy. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Loretta. You know what you must do?
Well, I think I've learned this line very well. I'm not an educator, but Franklin, it's been fantastic. I just want to say thank you, Lisa. Thank you. It's been amazing.
My pleasure.
But most importantly, we want to thank the Butler Legacy Foundation for being the sponsor of this, along with this amazing, I'm always blown away when I come in here, this amazing setting of the Echo Gallery at Bahar Mar. They have been so supportive.
Absolutely.
And we know that this podcast would not happen without them. And so we'd like to thank them. And just to say, we're so happy that we have so many guests that enjoy this. But thank you very much, Bahar Mar, for allowing us to use this beautiful space.
Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, follow the Legacy Podcast on your favorite platform. YouTube, Facebook, Spotify,
Apple TV,
Instagram.
I got it now.
You got it. You're getting inimitable and learning all the young technology
Absolutely.
terms. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Loretta. Thank you so much.